Hi, everybody. This is your screencast on the Age of Exploration. We are moving back to Europe after looking at some of the civilizations in the Americas, the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca, and establishing the fact that there were advanced civilizations that existed there for hundreds of years before Columbus arrived. So we're going back to Europe, and we're going to first look at some of the reasons why an age of exploration took place there, starting in the 1400s. And that goes back to actually the Renaissance, which encouraged a new spirit of adventure and curiosity. And let's see. And then the Protestant Reformation, which began a period of questioning, in that case, questioning religion, right? And then a revolution, the scientific revolution, which led people to question what is the universe like around the world and what part do we play in it. And now we will get to the age of exploration that will end with the bringing together of people in the Americas and Europeans and Africans as well. So let's see. Europeans had not completely been isolated from the rest of the world before the 1400s, right? After the end of the Middle Ages, they went over to the Middle East to fight in the Crusades and made a lot of discoveries, and realized how far behind they were in the rest of the world. And I don't know if we ever mentioned this in class. In 1275, the Italian trader Marco Polo left Italy, traveled with his father and uncle all the way to China, and they remained in China for about 20 years as advisors to the Mongol leaders in charge of China at the time. So, the desire to grow rich and to spread Christianity, coupled with advances in sailing technology, spurred an age of European exploration. The heading on this slide is God, Glory, and Gold. And that's really a nice summary of the reasons why Europeans wanted to explore the world. They wanted to conquer new land, right, for their country. So that's glory for their country. Be the first to find it, be the first to claim it. When they claimed that land, they were hoping to find gold there, right, to get rich. And they intended to spread their religion, Christianity, and convert people to Christianity in the lands that they conquered. So that's the God part. God, glory, and gold. 3 G's. Okay, so the desire for new sources of wealth was the main reason for European exploration. Their goal was to reach Asia and acquire a lot of the spices and silk that they had there. Going back to when we were in school, I believe I showed you guys a part of the Mankind video where Columbus discovers America, or we were leading up to that. And the starting point of that discussion was the conquering of Constantinople by the Muslims in 1453, right? After the commercial revolution happened in the 1300s, 1400s in Europe, and now people are trading again, right? They come back from the Crusades, they're moving into towns, they're using banking, merchants are taking loans from their banker, and then buying up the new products at the trade fairs in Europe and trying to travel long distance. Well, in 1453, when the Ottomans conquered Constantinople, they took control of the Silk Road trade routes. And it became very expensive and dangerous for Europeans to travel by land along the Silk Roads to Asia. And so instead of going by land, they're going to try to go by sea, mainly at first by sailing around Africa. All right. And eventually, excuse me, Columbus will attempt to go west instead. All right. Some of the technology that made this exploration possible a new type of ship called the caravel, which was sturdier than the older ships and had triangular sails instead of square sails, which made it safer to sail against the wind. The Muslims had invented a tool called the astrolabe, which helped sailors to determine their latitude on the earth, how far north or south they were from the equator. And of course, from the Chinese, the Europeans acquired the compass, which allows them to tell their direction. This diagram here on the bottom left is actually a diagram of the astrolabe. It's almost like a protractor connected to a compass, and you put the bottom point on the horizon, match the top point to the North Star, and whatever angle that forms on the tool helps determine your latitude, north or south on the earth. Okay, so it's going to be the Portuguese who take the lead in the Age of Exploration, mainly because they had government support for exploration coming from their Prince Henry the Navigator, who opened a school in Portugal that became famous for map makers, instrument makers, shipbuilders, scientists, sea captains, anybody who, like, if you wanted the best training in sailing and exploration, you went to his school in Portugal. And so it will be the Portuguese who lead the way in sailing around the tip of Africa on their way over to Asia. Okay, the first Portuguese explorer to sail around the tip of Africa is Bartholomew Diaz. And he made it around the tip of Africa, but he basically turned right around and, sailed back up the coast of Africa to Portugal. But then another Portuguese explorer, Vasco da Gama, not only made it around the tip of Africa, but all the way to India. In 1499, he returned to Portugal with a cargo worth 60 times the cost of his voyage. So, big money. Okay, this shows the voyages of those two men, right? Vasco da Gama coming in 1497, making it just around the tip of Africa, and then turning around. Wait a minute. Nope, that's Diaz. Turning around, Vasco da Gama going all the way to India. Sorry. Okay. Spain is going to rival Portugal in this age of exploration. And of course, their king and queen, Ferdinand and Isabella, are the ones who will sponsor Christopher Columbus on his voyage to sail west, hoping to make it to Asia instead of sailing all the way around Africa. And he's going to make his voyage in 1492. When he did finally reach land after several weeks, he actually believed that he was in Japan or India. Different accounts by historians say different things. There are, theories that support why he thought he was in Japan, theories why he thought he was in India. All the islands in the South Pacific Ocean and in the Indian Ocean were called the East Indies. And so landing on an island in the ocean, he would have called those people Indians, whether it was technically Japan today or India today. So he referred to them as Indios, and that's why we call the Native Americans, he called them Indians. Okay. Pretty quickly, though, he realized he was not where he thought he was, and that he had discovered a whole new land that Europeans had not been to before, and those will be the Americas. All right, moving away from Columbus for a second, we will go back to him. Just the continuation of Portuguese domination over trade in India. They took trade by sea in India over from the Muslims. They captured a port city in India. They continue to build their trade in India, and they're going to dominate European trade in India. And the reason they're able to do that is because when they sail back to Portugal, they're going to sell their goods in Europe for far less than the Muslims were selling them from the Silk Road trade, and that's going to make them big money. Okay, some other European countries who begin to fight for land around the world through exploration will be England and the Netherlands. Eventually, the Netherlands will, or the Dutch will take over the trade in India from the Portuguese. Okay, back to Columbus. And this is what I was saying about where he landed and why he called the people the natives there, Indians. Okay. Christopher Columbus will be the first to reach the Americas in 1492. He landed on an island in the Caribbean that he named San Salvador, or the Savior, believing he was either in Japan or the East Indies, referred to the people as Indians. I'm not going to say that again, I promise. He took a bunch of gold. He took some of the Native Americans back with him as slaves. A ton of new food products and plants that had never been seen in Europe before, and returned to Europe. But he did return back to the Americas 3 times. Each voyage, when he landed and the longer he stayed in the West Indies, or these Caribbean islands, he was made the governor of one of the islands by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. And they were really mistreating the Native Americans there, which got him in trouble back in Spain. And so Columbus died in Spain, pretty much under house arrest. He was never allowed to go back to the Americas after that 3rd voyage. Okay. Some other explorers who went into the Caribbean and through South America. Pedro Cabral in 1500 claimed the colony of Brazil in South America for the Portuguese. Amerigo Vespucci in 1501 was the first to attempt to make a map of South America and the islands in the Caribbean. And so he signed his name on the bottom of this first map, and people misunderstood that as a labeling on the map, and that's how the Americas got their name, from Amerigo Vespucci, who was a map maker. And finally, Ferdinand Magellan in 1519 left Portugal, attempting to sail around the world. He almost did it. He landed in the Philippines. His crew had to fight a battle there against the natives, and he was killed in that battle. But the rest of his crew did successfully make it back to Portugal in 1522, and Magellan was given credit for being the first to circumnavigate the world. Some other Spanish conquerors, also known as conquistadors in Spanish. The first one we have here is Hernando Cortez, who landed in Mexico in 1521 and was able to conquer the Aztec civilization there. Some of the reasons that he conquered them so easily was that at first, and I think you should have read about this in the summary on the Aztecs, at first the Aztecs believed that Cortez and his men were gods, that one of their gods, according to legend, was going to return to them, and that now they were here. And of course, in order to please their gods that had returned, they gave them a lot of their gold as, a tribute. And, of course, Cortez and the Spanish took total advantage of that. The Spanish also had more advanced weapons. Okay, by the 1500s, they have guns. The Aztecs obviously do not. The Aztecs, besides the Spanish, though, had a lot of enemies in the tribes around them, because if you remember, they went after these neighboring tribes to conquer their people for human sacrifice. And so, if anyone was going to help defeat the Aztecs, the other native tribes around them were definitely going to, team up with the Spanish to get rid of the Aztecs. The other problem is that the Europeans brought over a lot of diseases from Europe that Native Americans were not immune to. And actually that killed more Native Americans, Aztecs or otherwise, than any other cause of death was European diseases to Native Americans. Okay, another Spanish conquistador, Francisco Pizarro. He explored South America, and in 1532, he was able to take over the Incan Empire in South America. Just a little summary here about that battle or the strategy that he used. Pizarro and his army of about 200 men met the Incan ruler Atahualpa near the Incan city of Cajamarca. Atahualpa brought several unarmed men for the meeting. The Spaniards waited in ambush, crushed the Incan men, kidnapped Atahualpa. He offered to fill a room with gold, I should say gold, not God. Fill the room with gold once, silver twice in exchange for his release. However, after receiving the ransom, the Spanish strangled him to death. And so after the death of their leader, the Incan people gave up their civilization, their empire, to the Spanish without a struggle. So very similarly, the Spanish under Cortez tricked the Aztec into giving up also. So definitely some psychological warfare involved in there also. Okay, Magellan's voyage showed that ships could reach Asia by way of the Pacific Ocean, right? Magellan's crew sailed successfully all the way around the world. And so, therefore, if you were to leave Europe, sail across the Atlantic, south of South America, around the tip of South America, cross the Pacific Ocean, right? You can end up over in Asia, sail through the Indian Ocean, around the tip of Africa, and back up to Europe. So they proved that you could cross the Pacific to get to Asia. However, because the Spanish were the first to do that, they claimed that route for themselves and forbid any other country from taking that route around the world or to Asia. And so the other countries in Europe who were interested in claiming land and dominating trade routes had to find another way. And so they are going to explore North America instead of South America in an attempt to find a water passage, what they call the Northwest Passage, to get over to Asia. All right, some of the French explorers looking for this Northwest Passage, Giovanni de Verrazzano, he explored the New York Harbor area. There's a bridge, the Verrazzano Bridge is named for him, which kind of crosses right over between Staten Island and Brooklyn as you're sailing into New York Harbor. Jacques Cartier, another French explorer who sailed a little bit further north down the St. Lawrence River and into what is present-day Montreal up in Canada. Samuel de Champlain has a lake, right? Lake Champlain, named after him. He also sailed the St. Lawrence River up in Canada. Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet sailed through the Great Lakes, found a connection between the lakes and the Mississippi River, and explored what today we would call the Midwestern region of the United States. And Sieur de La Salle sailed the entire length of the Mississippi River, claiming that entire region, what would be the middle of the United States today, for the French, and as a result, New France became the largest colony in the Americas. Okay, or at least in North America. By the 1700s, the colony of New France covered land from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, right? We're looking at this light peach territory there, claimed by the French. The dark orange is claimed by the Spanish. And eventually the British came over also, and you can see on the coast of North America there, the green shows our 13 colonies. All right, as we know, there is no Northwest Passage leading through North America to the Pacific Ocean. They never found one. But instead, the French and the English stayed and settled in North America, creating their colonies there. The French were more concerned with fur trapping because all the French liked their fancy fur on their clothes and their coats and their hats and everything. And so they formed a pretty good relationship with Native Americans in North America because they weren't trying to permanently stay on their land. They were always here, but they were traveling, and they actually appreciated the help of Native Americans in helping them to trap the animals for their fur. Okay, the English want to permanently settle. The first English permanent English colony in North America was Jamestown, Virginia, established in 1607, followed by Plymouth, Massachusetts, which was founded by the Pilgrims in 1621. All right, here's a picture of Jamestown, Virginia. The original colony was within the three walls here, forming that triangular shape. They were not successful at first. They had a really hard time growing crops in this soil, but eventually the Native Americans helped them to learn how to grow their crops, and they also discovered that tobacco grows really well in this soil in Virginia, and tobacco is going to be their cash crop that makes them so much money, and to eventually need to expand out beyond that original triangle into what you can see as more of a rectangular shape added on there. Picture of Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts. Okay, Dutch explorers. The first Dutch explorer in North America was Henry Hudson. Anything around this area that is named Hudson is named after Henry Hudson. Obviously, he was looking for that Northwest Passage. He did not find it. He did sail through New York Harbor north on the Hudson River that is named for him, obviously, to right about the area of Albany before the river got too shallow for his ships and he had to turn around. After he turned around, he sailed further north into Hudson Bay and Hudson Harbor, which are also named for him. They're up in Canada. At that point, his ships, his crew, they were running very low on supplies. And when Hudson refused to return home, they actually mutinied on the ship and threw him overboard in a little rowboat, I believe, with his son. And he was never seen again by Europeans anyway. So that was the end of Henry Hudson, who has so much around here named after him. I love Henry. Okay. There's the Hudson. You're familiar with the Hudson River and where that is, obviously, but this is the Hudson Bay that he claimed for the Dutch. Okay, so the Dutch established a colony along the Hudson River that had been explored by Henry Hudson. Their original name for Albany was Fort Orange, and their original name for New York City was New Netherland, right? The Dutch being from the Netherlands. If you look at this map, though, all of the red shows us the English colonies, okay? These are the New England colonies settled by the English. We don't see it on the map, but further down to the south is the Virginia colony, right? Jamestown, Virginia. And so the problem for the English was that the Dutch claimed their territory right smack in the middle of all the English colonies, and the English just saw them as being in the way. And so in 1664, the English Navy sailed into New York Harbor, challenged the Dutch to a war over their colony. The Dutch didn't want to fight the English, and so the Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, if you ever heard of Stuyvesant Plaza, which is down by Crossgates, Peter Stuyvesant was the Dutch governor of New Netherland, who basically handed the colony over to the English in 1664. The English renamed it New York. Okay, the colony New York and the city New York. Okay, so with the English now having a strong claim to land in North America, the French feel threatened. If they were able to take the Dutch colony of New Netherland, now the French are thinking, are the English coming after our territory as well? And so this led to a war between the French and the English over their colonies here in North America. And the French, having a better relationship with the Native Americans, had the Native American tribes on their side. And so from the English perspective, this was the war that they fought against the French and the Indians, and so it is called the French and Indian War. It took place in 1754 until 1763. And the result of that war was victory for the English. And as a result of their loss, the French lost all of their territory in North America. Some of their land went to the English, some of their land went to the Spanish. But pretty much the French are out of North America for now because of their loss in the French and Indian War. Okay, the Atlantic slave trade. There was definitely some summary reading on this, okay? Who took an early lead in bringing Africans to the Americas? It's going to be the Spanish, because their land, the land that they claimed, was especially good for growing cash crops like tobacco and sugar and rice. And originally, if you look at question 2 here, it says, why were they bringing Africans to the Americas? Well, they had first tried to enslave the Native Americans under a system called the encomienda system. And the Native Americans were not immune to European diseases, and they died off so quickly that the Spanish realized, we need other people to work all of these plantations, growing these labor-intensive cash crops. And so, leaving Spain before they crossed the Atlantic to the Americas, they would sail south, stop along the western coast of Africa, and take slaves from West Africa and bring them over here to the Americas. Okay, this is just a picture of a sugar plantation on an island in the Caribbean. Okay, the English, who had colonies on the southern coast of what is today the United States, colonies like North and South Carolina, Virginia, right, growing tobacco, also started doing the same as the Spanish and stopping in Africa before they came to the United States to get slaves to bring over. And so now we've got 3 continents involved in this trade and exploration and colonization. We have Europe, we have Africa, and we have the Americas. And so this trade involving Europeans stopping in Africa, they're bringing products from Europe to Africa that the leaders of the African kingdoms wanted. In exchange, they took the slaves, left Africa, brought them to work growing the natural resources in the Americas. Those natural resources, or raw materials, it says on the map here, like sugar, cotton, tobacco, rice, are going to be brought to Europe, manufactured, and then sold back in Africa in exchange for slaves, and the process starts all over again. So this became known as the triangle or triangular trade. Okay, the passage from Africa to the New World or to the Americas became known as the Middle Passage. The voyage that brought captured Africans to the Caribbean and later to North and South America. The conditions on these ships were absolutely terrible. Sickening cruelty characterized this journey. European traders packed Africans into the dark holds of the large ships. They were crammed into the bottom of the ships, no bathrooms. They were chained together. If someone got sick, nothing was done about it. They were whipped, they were beaten, just absolutely unspeakable conditions on these ships coming over as slaves to the Americas. Okay, some pictures of the conditions in the bottom of the ship. You can see everyone sitting there together and throwing people overboard also. As punishment, or if someone was sick or passed away in the bottom of the ship, they would throw them overboard. Okay. A result of the age of exploration is known as the Columbian Exchange. Okay, Columbian, obviously named after Columbus, because this exchange would not have taken place when it did if it was not for his voyage. So Columbian Exchange is the global transfer of foods, plants, and animals during the colonization of the Americas. Just a couple things I want to point out on this map for you. If you look at some of the products leaving the Americas, tomatoes, for example. Tomatoes were never seen in Europe before 1492, or Columbus's return from his voyages, yet they were brought to Europe, and in Italy they became a staple of the Italian diet, right? Like spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, right? They cook a lot with tomatoes in Italy. Another example is the potato, never seen in Europe, yet became a staple in the Irish diet, right? Let's see. Chocolate, cocoa, right? Cocoa beans brought from Central America over to Europe, and now Dutch chocolate is a famous kind of chocolate, right? The Dutch are known for that. Going the other way, bananas, right, are grown throughout Central and South America, but and that's where we get them from, but they had never been seen in the Americas prior to Columbus's voyage. The other one, citrus fruits, right, like peaches. Georgia peaches are, that's sort of what Georgia is known for, their peaches, and they came from Europe when Columbus made his voyage. Coffee beans, right? Colombian coffee. Colombia is in South America, but coffee beans were never seen in the Americas prior to Columbus. So just a couple ironic things to point out to you there in this Columbian exchange. Okay, if we were taking notes, I'd be asking you to look at that diagram and look for those products. All right, we're pretty close to the end here, I believe. All these new products coming into Europe greatly improved its economy, and they greatly improved the diet of Europeans. And now everyone in Europe wants to get their hands on these new foods and products, leading to the growth of capitalism. Capitalism is the economic system that we have in the United States today. It means that private citizens have the ability to open their own business and control it if they choose to. So there's your definition. Economic system based on private ownership and the investment of resources such as money for profit, right? People open their own business. They pool their money with others to form their own business so that you can make more money than you started with, right? That's your profit. Okay, so the rise of capitalism and the growth of capitalism in Europe means that the kings and queens and princes and the royalty of these European countries were not the only ones who were able to get rich now. We see merchants and explorers who are pooling their money, putting them together, creating these colonies to bring back new products to Europe and make money on them. So now, like I said, merchants and traders could become wealthy, not just kings and queens. Okay, so I mentioned that some people pooled their money together to form a company, and there's actually a name for that. It's called the joint stock company. Today in the United States, we call it a corporation. A corporation is a business that you can buy stock in. Okay, so joint stock company. Join your money to make a profit in your company. Investors buy shares of stock in a company hoping it will succeed and they will make a profit. Okay, so that would be more on like a small or a large group scale that citizens are joining these stock companies to make a profit. But if we widen the scope of that to countries and leaders of countries, they became interested in this theory of mercantilism. All right, the theory that a country's power depends on its wealth. And that's really not a new idea to us, right? We've probably heard the statement, wealth is power. Okay, and so all the countries in Europe started competing for land and colonies and resources because the more of those things they had, the more advantage they had over other countries, their neighbors in Europe. Okay, according to mercantilism, a nation could increase its wealth and power in two ways. So as they explore and as they colonize, they're looking for the most gold and silver as possible to increase their wealth. And they also want to establish a favorable balance of trade. And this is an economic concept. It's pretty simple. It basically means that you are selling more than you buy. Right? If you think about it with a household income, right? Your bills, right? The money that you are paying out cannot be more than the amount of money that you are bringing in a paycheck, right? It's always good to have more money coming in than going out. And that's what these countries are trying to establish, a favorable balance of trade. And a nation's ultimate goal under this system of mercantilism is to become totally self-sufficient. So if a small country like England, let's say, right, doesn't have a lot of natural resources of its own, or they're only going to have so much of any given resource. If they want to remain powerful in Europe, they're going to have to go out around the world and find and claim other land and form an empire so big that they have all these resources that they need within those colonies or those territories, and they won't need to buy products from any other country. They basically can have it all for themselves from their colonies. We talked about a self-sufficient manor, right? Everything was made on the manor. Well, now countries want any resource that they may need to produce either within their country themselves or in their colonies. Okay. Mercantilism went hand in hand with colonization, for colonies played a vital role in this new economic practice. Aside from providing silver and gold, colonies provided raw materials that could not be found in the home country, such as wood or furs. In addition to playing the role of the supplier, the colonies also provided a market. Okay. So now let's say England, who had 13 colonies here in the United States, they need a strong navy, right? So they need wood to build their ships. Well, up here in the northeastern colonies, we have tons of forests, right? So that's going to become a natural resource, trees. For the British, they're going to cut down the trees in the Americas, bring that raw cut down wood, right, chopped wood on their ships over to England, build their ships, and then send them back to the Americas to be sold to the American colonists. Okay. Now, if in the American colonies we have a lot of forests, why couldn't the English colonists cut down their own trees, build their own ships, and sell it to themselves, amongst themselves here in the Americas? Well, because that leaves out England, and the whole purpose of England having their colonies is to serve England. Okay. And it looks like that is the last slide on the Age of Exploration. So I'm going to post some questions in a Google form for you on this Age of Exploration. This is the last subtopic that we have in this unit. And so coming up next is going to be a study guide and a test that will cover everything going back to the Renaissance, Protestant Reformation, scientific revolution, Age of Exploration, and the early American civilizations. All right, so look for that to come out, I believe, Monday next week. All right, guys, you're doing a great job keeping up on all of your work. Hang in there. We're almost done. Just a couple more weeks. I wish that we could have been together till the end, and I'm still missing you guys. All right.